My name is Andrew Park. I am going to tell you a little bit about the Yogyakarta Principles. They're a set of principles contained in a document about 35 pages long, which set out the standards that governments must comply with if they want to respect, protect, and fulfill the human rights of LGBTI people. It's a two-part document. The first part was issued after a meeting of international human rights experts in the city of Yogyakarta, Indonesia, and that was in 2007. In 2017, a different group of experts met in Geneva to come up with a 10-year update, and that's called the Yogyakarta Plus 10 document. I was fortunate enough to be one of the people in both of those meetings, so I've tracked the development of the principles closely. The principles go through all the human rights treaties, the Convention Against Torture, the Convention for the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, other such treaties, and figures out how those treaties apply to issues of sexual orientation and gender identity. Now, there are no particular human rights that apply only to LGBT people. All human rights apply to all people, and all people have a sexual orientation and gender identity. So the language of the principles is not about the rights of LGBTI people, it's about human rights in relation to sexual orientation and gender identity. Now, the authors knew that the population they were concerned with was LGBTI people because those are the ones that tend to be marginalized because of their sexual orientation and gender identity. But all the rights stated in the Yogyakarta Principles belong to all people. And the principles were used immediately after they were issued. And one of the reasons why is because the principles are not an aspiration. They don't signify what we think the international standards should be. They signify what the international standards are. So you can take the principles and go to a government official and say, this is a listing of everything, all the standards that are currently enforced that your government must follow right now in order to respect, protect, and fulfill the human rights of LGBTI people. Fairly immediately after the principles were issued, or at least within the next few years, they were the subject of legislation. There were several countries that passed legislation saying we support these principles and we hope to live up to them. There were many governments whose foreign affairs and ministries of foreign affairs said this is how we want our operations to work internationally. Just a partial list includes Argentina, Brazil, Bolivia, Colombia, Canada, India. In fact, in India, the High Court of India, the first time it invalidated the sodomy law in India, said the principles are a comprehensive identification of the obligation of states to respect, protect, and fulfill the human rights of all persons, regardless of their sexual orientation and gender identity. They've also been referenced in court cases in Mexico, Nepal, South Africa, Singapore. They have been the subject of hearings and deliberations at the Organization of American States, the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, the European Union, the Council of Europe. So they've had a lot of traction because they're essentially a one-stop shop of what are the obligations of a government with regard to LGBTI rights. A global leader, I gotta have a light shining on me, a global survey of global LGBTI leaders that took place, I think, in 2010, called the Principles one of the greatest accomplishments in the past 10 years because they played a crucial role in establishing a language on sexual orientation and gender identity that's now used by a growing number of UN actors and states. And I'm sure the principles will continue to be used in the future as one of the most important documents for global LGBTI rights.